Welcome to Widowed Too Soon, where real-life widows and widowers come together to share their stories of survival, faith, and the journey of finding hope in the darkest of times. Whether you're newly widowed or have been on this journey for some time, each week we're here to provide you with inspiration, practical advice, and the reassurance that you are not alone. You were made to not only survive, but thrive. And now here's your host, a woman who has walked this path herself, who finds solace in writing, joy in speaking, and freedom in dancing like nobody's watching. Michelle Bader Ebersole.
Welcome to Widowed Too Soon. This is Michelle Bader Ebersole. I'm so excited to be back again with another guest. We've had so much positive feedback about having guests, and today we have a new friend of mine we just met, and she has done absolutely amazing things, a true story of God taking mourning and turning it into dancing and taking ashes and making them into beauty. So today I have with me Kathryn Monaco-Douglas. How are you today, Kathryn?
I'm great. Thank you, Michelle. I
Yes.
appreciate the opportunity to be on here with you.
Oh, yeah. I'm so happy you're here. So tell us where you're coming from. Like, where in the world do you live?
I live in Long Island, New York, which
Oh,
everyone knows from my accent.
yeah. I was going to say your accent gives that away for sure.
All
And
I do is say good morning, and they're like, what part of Brooklyn are you from? Or what
uh-huh,
part of New York are you from?
exactly. I love it. And have you lived there your whole life?
Yes. Yes, I
Okay.
have. I grew up in Brooklyn and then I moved to Long Island. So I have a little bit of a Brooklyn, Long Island accent, which I'm
Yes.
working on with my book, trying to find somebody to do the audio that speaks like
Oh,
me. It's very
yes.
difficult.
Yes. And we could talk about this later, but you can do the
Yeah,
audio yourself. I did it for my book.
that's great.
Yeah, so that's fun too. Actually, I loved having my own voice on it. So,
Hmm.
and we'll get to that. We're going to get to talking about your book and all of
Okay,
that
cool.
stuff. So, let's back it up. And I want to know your whole story. So, I'm going to be learning along with everybody else. So, let's start with tell us how you met your late husband.
We actually met in a bar.
Okay.
Yep. And I have to say it was love at first sight.
Aw.
He was a redheaded Italian with a heavy Brooklyn accent. I
Mm,
He had gorgeous blue eyes. And I fell in love the minute I looked at him.
wow.
And we just connected on so many things and we were never
Mm,
apart until he
wow.
died.
And what's his name and how old were you when you met?
Uh, I met him when I was 21.
Uh-huh.
And we were a year and a half apart. His name is Larry.
Okay.
And that's a funny thing that you just said. What was his name? Because it's still his name.
Yes.
And there's a sheet when we register people, we say, what was his name? And I crossed it out
Yeah, it
because it's
is.
still his name.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
I don't know. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So his name is Larry, and he was 44,
Mm-hmm.
and I was 42 when he died. I
Okay.
have three children with him. My children were 11, 14, and 18 when he passed.
Mm.
And we were married 19 and a half years together.
Mm. So tell us about your life. You get married, you're having kids. Like, what was life like with him? Like, what did he do for
There was
work? What did?
always something going on. We used to
Yeah.
travel a lot with the kids. Everything was with the kids,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm happy about after he
Yeah.
passed. Like that we did so many vacations with them and we just did so much with the kids. He was all about family. He had
Mm-hmm.
his own business, but he always made time for the kids,
Mm-hmm.
and he was very close with my boys. The two older ones are the boys. And right before he passed away, he took my daughter to Barbizon for modeling because he
Oh.
said she's too rough. She's hanging out with the boys too much. She's getting too rough. She needs a little femininity. So he took it. So him and her would go on the train into Manhattan, and she would do this course. But and it was just nice her daddy time with him.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So I'm
Yeah.
happy that they had that.
Mm-hmm. So you guys had a great, fun, happy life. What was life like, when he passed away? Tell us about the day that happened and how you were feeling and all of
Yeah.
that.
So his story is a little unusual because a year before he passed, he had this incident where he felt like he was going to die.
Oh.
He said to me, I don't feel right. And he went to take a shower. In the shower, he called me. And when I went in there, he was all pale and he said to me, oh, I didn't feel like I was going to pass out. I felt like I was going to die. And I was
Mm.
like, oh my goodness. He goes, and the only thing I could think about was you and the kids. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I'm calling a doctor, and I take him to this doctor um, who said to him that Larry had a birth condition on his right arm, and that's where I would sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So the doctor told us he had a little blood clot that passed through his system,
Oh.
and he was just lucky. There were no signs of the blood clot, but I wasn't allowed to sleep on him anymore,
Yeah.
which after we were married at that point, 18 and a half years. And so for a whole year to the day, to the actual day, we had a whole year together, and then he passes on the same day,
Whoa.
1 year later, and he dies from a blood clot. And we go back to the same doctor, and they send us home, and the next day he died. So it was medical negligence.
Oh,
And
wow. Like they didn't like tell me more about that. Like he should
yeah,
have they should have
they,
kept him.
yeah, they should have
Mm-hmm.
sent us to an emergency room or something.
Right.
When he said he had the same feeling again, I was like, we're going back to the doctor. So we went with
Right.
no appointment. And we didn't have cell phones back then. So
Right.
we rushed to the doctor. We sit in the doctor's office for 2 hours, and we're waiting um, for them to examine him. They do an ultrasound, and they see that they tell us to wait for 2 hours. They're going to talk to the doctor. So we don't know whether he's got a blood clot or not. After 2 hours, they tell us, come back on Monday, and they give us a card, like the appointment card. And I'm like, that's it?
Mm.
And they're
Right.
like, yeah. So I said, okay, well, maybe it's not a blood clot. It was just in our minds that it was a blood clot because of what happened the year before. We went while we were waiting the 2 hours. We said, could we go to get breakfast and come back? And they said, yeah. We're waiting for the results. We went and had breakfast. While we were at breakfast, I went on a payphone and I called my
Mm-hmm.
sister and my best friend. I go, I don't know. I think they're going to admit him. I think he's got a blood clot. Like I was panicking. And we get back to the office and they send us home. So we thought, okay, he didn't have a blood clot. And then that night, the doctor said to take it easy and keep his arm elevated, which he did. And that night, we watched a movie. We canceled our plans for the next evening. And the next day, we wake up. I went out shopping with my 14-year-old, and I came back, and my daughter screams out to me, I've been trying to wake up Daddy, but I can't wake him up.
Mm.
And I go in the room, and he's on the floor. And that was it. So when I left that day, I said to him, I'm just going to run to the store. And he said, you're going to give me a kiss goodbye? I go, I'm going to be right back. But yeah, I stepped back up and
Oh.
I kissed him and I said, I love you. And he said, I love you too. And that was the last thing that we said to each other.
Mm,
So I
that's
felt like that. I didn't know that was going to be my goodbye.
right. Wow. So that's
So
very shocking. Like I'm
it was shocking. It was traumatizing. It was awful. And then what
mm-hmm.
pursues after that is a nightmare, like
Boy.
everyone that is widowed. It's no matter if you watch them sick or it's sudden, either way, it's a nightmare.
It's completely, yeah, you feel like I'm in a nightmare right now. So I don't know if you know this. So my husband had cancer, but he actually died from a blood clot.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, so because I was like, what happened to him? Because he had the hospice nurse had been there that day and she's like, I think he has a month to 6 weeks left. I'm like, okay. I woke up to him. He was still fully functioning and he was like in the
Hmm.
hall. The lights were on at 4 a.m. I'm like, what's happening? He's like, my calf really hurts. And so I got him like
Mm.
ice pack. I got him a heating pad. Had no idea. He just kept saying his calf hurt so bad. And then all of a sudden he couldn't breathe. And later on, they said we didn't do an autopsy, but they're like, we're pretty sure he had a blood clot that either went to his lungs that were full of cancer and he couldn't survive, or to his heart. And so I have just a little experience with the blood clot thing. It's very scary, but they said
And it
what's
sounds kind of negligent a little bit because, like they didn't even do a Doppler or something to see if he had something in his leg,
mm-hmm,
right? you're putting ice and heat on it, but no one's looking to see if he had a blood clot or something like
Well,
that,
nobody was there. Like it was really quick, they like
Oh, it was
an
really quick.
hour between the time he woke up. I mean, the hospice nurse got there, but it was already,
Oh,
but
I'm
I look
sorry.
at the positive of that. He didn't suffer. They're like, with blood clots, it's like it's not suffering. It's quick. It's like,
Right, they told me that. It
yeah.
was
So
quick.
there was some,
Larry's was in his armpit. He was complaining
okay.
about his armpit, and it went right to his lungs.
Yeah. And so there's some comfort in knowing there's no suffering with that.
Hmm.
And also with cancer, he was so scared of us having to take care of him and like change him, like all the things down the line. And so we look at
Hmm.
that as a blessing that he didn't have to go through all of
Right.
that. So, anyways, but back to your story. You probably didn't know that because it's just
I didn't.
in my
I didn't
story
know that.
somewhere
Yeah.
so I usually just say cancer because I mean, it was cancer, even his
Right.
death certificate says cancer, but it was actually the blood clot. So, but anyways, back to your story. Okay, so you're a brand new widow, totally out of the blue. Like, what is life like for you? Let's walk us through that. And your
Well,
kids are
it's
small
not
or
like
not little.
life now
Right.
because back then we didn't have phones, like I said. We
True.
didn't
Yeah.
have Facebook. We
Right.
didn't have Google. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have audio books. We didn't have a lot of things
Podcasts.
that, yep, we didn't have a lot of things that widows today have.
That's true.
And it was really, really challenging.
I'm sure.
My sister found a support group in a Jewish Y because the church didn't have anything.
Yeah.
There was very little out there. I had no education on grief at all. I
Right.
The only person that passed were my grandparents, and
Right.
that was to be expected. They were with age,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
But this like totally blew me away.
Right.
I didn't know anyone that had gone through it, so I didn't know what to expect or how to go through it. So I joined the grief group, and I went in and I didn't go in. I wasn't really dedicated to it. I was trying to fighting. I didn't want to be a widow. I
Uh-huh.
just didn't want to be a widow. Like every widow doesn't want to be a widow.
Right.
And at the end is when I really connected. And I connected with a couple of people, but nobody wanted to get together afterwards. And I
Uh-huh.
still needed more.
Yeah.
So then I went across town to another grief group, and they put me with like 60 and 70-year-olds whose kids were grown and they're all sharing. So one of the things that was the worst is that everybody sits in a circle and shares the details of their grief, and there's a lot of people in the room.
It's a
Like I
lot.
couldn't handle their stories
That's right.
on top of mine. Like I'm
Yeah.
grieving, and and you never know what somebody's going to say, like how that person died, and it was just too much information for me. And then when I went to the second group and they started doing it again, like I empathized with every person. This was horrible, all these stories. And when they got to me, I was hysterical. And I got up and I went, who created these groups? Whoever did it wasn't a widow. And
Yeah.
I stood up and I walked out, and I cried hysterical all the way home. And I said, if I ever get through this, I'm going back and I'm going to help other widows because this is horrible. This is just horrible. So in the first group, um, the couple of people that I did meet, I kept connecting with them, and I told them how horrible it was and that someday I'm going to do something about this. But right now I need to survive.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing. And we used to meet every week. I would encourage it because I needed that connection. These were the only people that understood my grief. 3 people. That was it. I had no one else to connect with.
Wow.
And one of them ended up being my husband now.
Oh, love that.
So we became like really close friends. And he lived in the town next to mine. So when we would meet the other people, we would drive together. And when it hit a year, he said to me, so are you ever going to think about dating? Because him and another guy that was in the group were dating already. And I was like, no, Larry was my one and only. Nope, it's
Mm-hmm.
not for me. But I said if I did date, it would have to be someone like you. Because he was such a sweet man. I mean, he would cry over Sally, and he was so sweet. And he said, you would date me? And I said, well, I meant someone like you.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't say it again because I didn't want to
Uh-huh.
make him feel bad. He goes, if you would date me, I would stop dating
Aw.
until you're ready. And I'm like, I'm not ready. And I might not be ready for a year. I might not be
Yeah.
ready for 2 years. He goes, I would wait 2 years for you.
Aw. Sweet.
And I was like, I'm not ready. I'm going to think about it. And I went in the house and nobody was home. And it was a weekend. The kids all had places they were going, and I was all alone. And I was like, if I don't change something, nothing's going to change. I'm so alone. I'm so lonely. And I waited another week. And then I sent him an email and I said, I'll have coffee with you. Again, I'm not going to marry him. I'm just going to have a cup of
Yeah.
coffee. And then that was it. We've been together ever since.
Wow. Now, did you have any grief when you started dating?
I had a lot of grief.
Yeah.
I kind of felt that it was too soon
Mm.
because I was still in a lot of grief, but we didn't get married right away. We dated for 3.5 years.
Mm.
He had 3 kids. They were much younger than mine. His daughter was 4, his son was 6, and he had an 11-year-old. And I wasn't ready,
Right.
like for kids and stuff. I was dealing with my own kids. And I was working full time, and I hadn't worked when I was married to Larry. I had to
Oh,
go
wow.
to work, and
Yeah.
everything was new to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't afford to stay in my house. So I had to sell my house. There was a lot of things on my plate. Plus, I had a medical negligence suit that
Oh,
was pending. So I was totally overwhelmed. I never paid bills in the house. I never
right.
did those kind
Me
of
either.
things. Oh, that was so overwhelming.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things I had to learn and I had to figure out. Um, and I think that was the hardest thing, that I was not thinking that I was capable of doing
Mm-hmm.
it. I think I really told myself, I kept saying, I don't know if I could do this. But what I learned was that every time I accomplished something, I
You
was
could
able
do
to
it.
do it.
Yeah.
And then I gained more confidence
Yes.
because I
Yes.
did it. I'm like, I did it. Yes, I got this. I didn't even have email.
Right.
I didn't even know how to send an email. I didn't even know you had a .com in the email. I was sending an
What?
email and I kept leaving the dot out. I kept saying, but why isn't it going
Oh,
through?
funny. Oh my goodness. But
So
you learned.
everything was new. Yep, I learned everything.
Yeah, I found it
And
like really empowering, like learning how to do one thing and then the next thing. Like I remember putting together some piece of furniture and I was all proud of myself from IKEA. And then like, I don't know, just one thing after another, then you're like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. It's just
right,
we're so used to our person doing it. It's not that we can't. They just had done it for so long. Like mine was like my big like grief moment was like changing like a mouse trap. Like there was a mouse and I had to set a mouse trap. I'd
oh
never
my
done it,
goodness.
and like taking care of it and all of that, just the things that you're like, I've never done this, but I could, I guess. And you learn how to do it.
Learn how to do it. Like I had
Uh-huh.
a toilet that I had problems with because we had everybody in the house when he died, and the toilet wasn't having problems flushing and stuff. And I had a man that was cleaning for me, um, and he was Spanish, so he had an accent, and he told me that my if I go to Home Depot and pick up the the flaca, he would fix it for me. So it was like, okay. So I went to Home Depot and I told the guy in Home Depot, I need a flacca. And he goes, what's a flacca? I go, it's a black thing in the back of the tank. He goes, you mean a flapper?
Oh,
It was his
I didn't know
accent.
what you were talking about. Okay.
I didn't know what it was. I never heard I didn't even know what a flapper was. So,
Right.
I mean, there was one thing after another like that. Like, I don't even know how I got through it, honestly.
Yes. Yes. Did you have any specific like verses or songs that helped you through that time period?
I couldn't listen to music.
Oh,
It was so
interesting.
painful. I just
Oh.
stopped listening to music.
Hmm.
Um, I'm an artist and I
Okay.
paint, and I was painting in the quiet and
Mm.
just thinking and painting and thinking and painting. And then I started hiring people to work for me because I was getting so busy with my work. And this one fella that I worked with, he says, we have to listen to music.
Yeah. It's
And
too
he used
quiet.
to play stuff, but not anything that I could relate to. It was like rock
Yeah.
music that I didn't connect with in any way, but it was the lyrics that I couldn't listen to.
Right. So
You
many
know,
love songs.
oh, every love song was about Larry and I.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Right.
It really was. It was really hard for me to like, I kept saying, I got to go forward. I got to just get through today.
Yes. And what was it that helped you to move forward? Was it going to the groups? Was it like what was it for you?
I guess time,
Mm-hmm.
just as time was passing, um, because the group broke up. It was just Scott and I. Um, and then we like were dating, and then we were going out with the kids, and I felt like I was living Groundhog Day because every day was the same. I would go to work, I'd come home, I would be exhausted, try to get some laundry, have takeout food for my kids. It was like I was just existing. I
Yeah.
wasn't living. Like I lost like all those years. Like when I reflect back, like
Yeah.
it just went so fast. And
Mm-hmm.
I always tell like other widows that your children only have one childhood, and it's already been compromised.
Right.
Like do your best to stay present, because
That's
I
good.
wish somebody would have told that to me, because I was out of it. I really was out. I was so traumatized. I didn't even know I was traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't even know what it was that I was. Um, I didn't have an easy childhood.
Mm.
So my grief was connected that I never did therapy with my childhood. It was connected together because I never took care of that
Right.
trauma.
Oh yeah. It is
So, and I
connected.
found that out later on. And I
Mm-hmm.
write about that in my book because a lot of people don't know that, your history connects to your grief
Oh yeah.
and how you handle your grief,
Mm-hmm.
how you learn how to handle other things in your life.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we do that in grief recovery. We go through like a whole lost history graph and like the things from your childhood are affecting you today. And I learned when I started grieving all this crazy stuff after Luke died, like from a long time ago, I was like, why is this happening? And my grief counselor said, when you grieve, it's like stew. Anything you've ever grieved comes to the top. And I was like, oh, that's why this is
Oh,
happening.
that's great analogy. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I understand that where it's yeah, it definitely connects. So let's talk about as you move forward, you get married and you had said you want to help widows. So tell us about
Right.
what you did.
So I waited till Scott and I, my second husband, were married a year
Mhm.
because I felt I wanted to make sure all the kids were adjusted in the house.
Mhm.
So he had three and I have three, and my oldest one didn't move in with us. We had a hard time blending our family. I'm not going to say that it was
Oh,
easy. It
yeah, that's
wasn't.
hard. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's a whole nother
I was
topic. I
going to
could write a
say that's
book
a
just on that,
whole
right?
podcast by itself. Yes.
Yeah. So, so it was just the five kids at home and Scott and I waited a year and things seemed better and I was ready and I went to the Jewish Y where Scott and I met because I felt, let me give back where I got.
Yeah.
And they rejected me. They said, you're not a psychologist or a social worker, so you can't do it. I'm like, but
What?
I lived it. I just went
Yeah,
through
that's
5 years of grief, and now I want to share with other people that you could still love your spouse and get married
yep.
and love that person too. Like you could do this. Like there's so many people. So I told her how I survived, how I painted, and how that's how I supported my kids. And so she calls me after a few weeks and says, we have a group for you. It's for singles and divorcees, and you could teach them how to paint. And I'm like, what?
That's not
She's
what you
not getting it. What? What? This is like when you meet people that don't understand widowhood.
right?
Like, what are you talking about? I don't
Yeah.
know anything about singles and divorcees. And I don't want to teach anyone how to paint because no one ever taught me how to paint. I just
Right.
know how to paint. So
Right.
I don't know how to teach someone. So I dismissed that, but I wasn't giving up. It was on my heart. I really felt like it was a calling.
Yeah.
And I called my church because I said, you know what? The church didn't have anything. And I
Right.
called the church and a little nun answers the phone. And I tell her that I want to do bereavement. And she said to me, oh my goodness. She goes, I was just praying for help with bereavement. I can't
Oh,
believe you called.
I love it.
And I was like, oh my goodness, when could you be here? And I was there in 5 minutes.
I love
So
it.
she says it was a 2-year training, which I did 1 year of. And then she allowed me to start doing the groups and she left me completely on my own. She gave me a
Mhm.
room, coffee, and I picked up cookies and I started doing groups. And I started with 4 elderly women. And one of the women that was in my first group, it was her second loss. She lost a second husband.
Mm.
And there was another girl that came in only one meeting and she said, I'm afraid. I'm afraid to date. I'm afraid to move forward. I don't want to, I'm just afraid of it happening again. And I said to her, if you could do it all over again, would you still have married your second husband? And she said, absolutely. And I was like, I thought that was perfect
Yeah.
because I feel the same way. Like, we never know what's going to happen in life, but I'm happy that I gave love a second chance,
Mm-hmm. Me too.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And from there on, it was word of mouth. I started getting group after group after group. And then after a couple of years, a woman stayed with me and she started doing groups with me, Arlene. And we did groups for 7 years. And
Wow.
then we lost one of our kids.
Mm.
And then when we lost him, I wasn't going to do groups anymore. And then I decided to go back and do groups again. I had 23 people waiting for me that I couldn't leave without a group. And so I started that group. And that group actually saved me. I couldn't even read the
Mm.
paperwork. I couldn't concentrate. I could barely get up and take a shower for the day. My husband was going to work. That was his coping mechanism, was to just go to work and keep busy. And mine
Mm-hmm.
was, I didn't have one. I didn't have any coping skills. I was like a mess. I was just
Mm-hmm.
a mess because it brought me back to my
Yeah.
Larry grief. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, when he died, I called my best friend, and instead of saying his name was Brett, I say Larry died. And she goes, what are you saying? I'm so
Right.
hysterical. I'm saying Larry died. She
Oh,
goes,
wow.
Larry died. I know. And I'm not hearing what she's saying.
Yeah. Wow.
And so she just comes over, and she helped me through it a lot because she
Mm.
had lost her dad when she was young. She helped me through both my losses.
Mm.
And still doing groups. And I'm going into my 19th year
Wow.
of doing support groups. And now we
That's
have
amazing.
we have like 33 facilitators who
Wow.
have come back, and we're like spread out all over. We're virtual, we're in person, um, and we're helping people all over. And when I saw your podcast and I was listening, I'm like, and I love what you said about being a widow influencer.
Yes, I was going to say you're definitely a widow
I love
influencer.
your word. I'm like, I feel like we're all on the same journey.
Yes. Yes. And let's talk about what you do with those groups. So I'm really curious because I was telling you before we started, it sounds like kind of a mix between the two things I do. So I've got grief recovery where we have an actual book and curriculum we go through, but it's just 7 weeks. And then I've got my widow goals groups where we just meet at someone's house every month and we just play games, or this month we're doing vision boards, or like it's just more community. So is yours like kind of a mix where you have like a curriculum and community, or can you tell us more about what you do? I'm so curious.
Yeah. So what we were doing up until COVID is every time we would end the group, we would have a gathering, and we would ask all the people from the previous groups to come to the gathering.
Oh,
And
okay.
we would have what we call a potluck gathering. And
Yeah.
so everybody would bring something and we would all be together. And the last one that we had 200 people in the basement of the church. And then
Wow.
COVID hit. And COVID, I felt like COVID was the year of crisis. And that's where I felt like all this training that I had was really for COVID, because there was so many widows and so many young
Mm-hmm.
widows, which
Yes.
people just don't know how many young
Right.
people there were. And so after the groups are over, like after the 8 weeks, we pick a captain and a co-captain in each group, and they keep the group continuing.
Oh,
And
that's
then
so
we have
great.
different events, and then all the groups come to the different events. I have two people in the group that started a bowling thing on Sundays so they could all go bowling and meet after
I
bowling
love
out. Even
it.
if they don't bowl, they go and they meet. And then in the summer, I try to do sunset gatherings where
Mm,
we all meet for the sunset, and people bring food and we hang out at the beach, and
I
it's
love
nice,
it.
you know. And
Yep.
then every year I did a walk picnic.
Mm.
Um, and I did like 13 walk picnics. I'm doing another one in June 8th.
What
We're going
is
to
a
have
walk
another one.
picnic? I'm not sure what a walk picnic is.
So we walk for a mile for those who died too soon,
Mm,
because we're all young,
yeah.
you know. Um, and then we picnic with our families
Mm,
and the children, and
I
we
love
have
that.
raffles and stuff to make it fun. And the raffle baskets are made out of the hobby of whatever the person that passed loved.
Oh, that's so
So,
beautiful.
and they do a little bio of your person. So, like I do a lottery tree because my husband liked to play the lottery. And
Mm,
then I put a little bio about Larry, how he was a redheaded Italian, how he loved to play the lottery, how
that's
he used to tell the girl
beautiful.
behind the counter, if I win, you win, like something like that. And some people put pictures and photos of their spouses or partners. And I have shirts made that say in memory of. And
Mm,
people put their spouses' pictures on their shirts. The kids write dad or mom, and they put their pictures
I
on.
love this so much.
And last walk we had 1,000 people, so it was
Oh
pretty
my
cool.
goodness.
Yeah, it was pretty
Wow.
big.
Well, we'll definitely be talking later because I would love to do something like that here. I think it would be amazing. Such a beautiful, beautiful
It's
event.
so fun. And like I had one guy that brought 93 people in memory of his wife.
I love that.
Like people, because like some people don't have a walk. Like some people have like there's walks for breast cancer, heart disease, pancreatic cancer. They have walks for them to raise money. But the way my husband died, there's nothing. And some
Right,
people have a car accident or a fall. There's nothing for them. And
right.
this unites all of us. And I think that one of the hardest things also in being widowed is that all our friends are coupled
Yeah,
and we don't feel like a couple anymore. We feel like we don't belong.
yeah.
And this is just everyone that's wearing the shirt that says in memory of is a widow. The
Hmm.
other guests get ribbons. They don't get to wear the t-shirt. So we all know who each other
Oh,
is.
wow.
And the children are wearing the shirts. So it lets you see that you have a whole community here. You're not alone,
That is one of the
and
most,
that's like,
yeah,
it's
beautiful
so big
things
for us.
I've ever heard of. I so want to do that. That sounds amazing. I could just imagine doing that here. And yeah, that would be amazing. You've done so many great things. So before we recorded, we were talking a little bit about your faith. So tell us more about how your faith deepened after your husband died.
Right. So I'm Catholic. I was born and raised Catholic. And I would go in and out of the church. Like I brought my kids to religion classes so that they would get
Mm-hmm.
their faith. I would take them to church on Sunday. But once they finished their second sacraments, we have sacraments. The second one was confirmation. They're like around 13 or so. I didn't have to go anymore. So I wasn't really going to church all the time. Sometimes if it worked out, like it wasn't a dedication.
Right.
I never picked up the Bible. I never read it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew certain things that people would tell me, like that there's no handicaps in heaven, like certain things, but
Yeah.
that's like, I didn't have a lot of knowledge about it. And as I was doing the groups, I started to notice that the people who had faith dealt with their grief so much better than I did.
Mm.
Like I would just like listen to them speak and the way they, like I'm like because I'm visual with the art, like I would watch their body language and they were handling it so much better than the people that were coming in and saying, I don't believe in anything. I wasn't
Yeah.
raised with faith. I don't believe in anything. It was such a variation in body language and the way they were handling it. And it was making me curious.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that they
Mm-hmm.
got that's making them like this? Even if they were Jewish, they were like that, like a heavy faith, whatever it was, they were handling it better than me and some of these
Mm-hmm.
other people. So I got curious and I started to take Bible study and I started to learn my Bible. And it's just amazing all the things that Jesus did for us.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
I don't go a day without missing going to church. I go every morning.
Oh,
I
really?
just,
Wow.
yep, I start my day with the word. If for some reason I can't go because something's tying me up, appointments or whatever, I listen to it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be without that
Right.
connection every day,
Right.
a couple of times a day. Just love to hear the word. And I listen
Yes.
to all different, like Christianity, like all different things on Instagram. I follow them all.
Yeah.
I just love it. It's just, I'm addicted to it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite verse or something that's really comforted you?
Um, So our Bible has a lot more books. I have
Mm-hmm.
the book of wisdom
Mm.
that we were told that Samuel wrote. And it says in there that God did not create death.
Mm.
nor does he rejoice in the destruction of life. And that I actually wrote in my Bible, my favorite quote.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it's my favorite, it's like, then who did?
Mm.
It was Satan.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand that we are born into a broken world.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that whole concept. I
Yeah.
was like, that's why all these things happen. It has nothing to do with whether you're a good person or not a
Right.
good person. You're not being punished. Like this didn't happen because you're
Oh,
being
yeah.
punished by God. I hear that a lot.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with that because God repeatedly says, take care of the widow, the orphan, and the
Yes.
foreigner,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
So take care of the widow. He wants us to be taken care of. So I didn't understand any of that. And it just opened up a whole bunch of answers for me as to why all this hardship.
Yeah.
And so, I share it when someone's confused. If everybody has different theology, about Christianity, but it's still Christ. And
Right.
I only go by the Bible. I don't go by any other type of dogma. I just share what I know that the Bible says.
Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
really loved the one that you had, the podcast that you had before me with the medium stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because I have a problem with that in my groups, that
Oh,
they
okay.
bring their children, and it's really scary that they're opening this up. We have a medium on Long Island. She's called a Long Island medium.
Oh,
She's
it's
like
like a
well
show.
known.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a show on TV, and everybody wants to go to her,
Mm.
and it's like, what do you want to find out from her? What
Mm-hmm.
is it that you want to find out? That they love you? You know they love you.
Right.
That they're
Yeah.
in heaven? If they believe they're in heaven, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they're there. You know it. Trust God.
Yeah.
You know where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I really liked that episode that you did. I thought that was important, like you said in the episode. It's so important for people to know.
Right. It definitely is. And it's definitely a hot topic even among Christians.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah, well,
know.
just read the Bible.
Yeah, and
Read
that's
what the Bible says.
yes, that's what it was so good to see. Like this is not an opinion. This is
Right.
straight from the Bible. So yes.
And
So
it's like your will and God's will. That's what I
mm-hmm.
learned. I didn't know the difference.
Mm,
I thought if you do good things, you're a good person and you go to heaven. I didn't
mm-hmm.
understand God's will and my will are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that was like an eye opener for me. It's not if you're a good person, it's if you're doing God's will,
Mm-hmm.
following God's will.
Mm-hmm. So
It's big.
you've done all these amazing things with starting the groups, all that. So tell us about this book that you just released. I'm really excited. I know mine's in the mail. I'm going to get it any day, but tell us what it's about and also where people can find it.
Okay, so in my beginning groups, I had a gentleman who went to like 3 or 4 groups. That's what people do around here. They group hop till they
Okay.
find my group. And because my group is a continuing group, it doesn't end. And that's what they like about it. And
Mm-hmm.
he said to me in the group, and I used his real name, Phil. He said, "You know why you're good at this?" And I just looked at him like, "Why?" And he was like, "Because you lived it."
Yeah,
So
exactly.
the people in the other groups that he was going to were social workers,
Right.
and they hadn't actually lived it, and he just wasn't connecting with them until he came into my group, and he realized that I lived it. I knew exactly what he was feeling because I felt it too. All the secondary losses
Oh
that
yeah.
we have in common. I feel like all our losses are different, but the secondary losses are what we really have in common.
Mm-hmm.
Going to sleep at night, waking up in the morning, the supermarket, all those things.
Yes.
So my book is about how it was for me when I lost Larry and what we did that was different in the groups and about groups because people don't understand support groups. They come in, they don't know what they're going to do. Um, I feel that in my area, they won't take you in unless you're 3 months after your
That's
loss.
crazy. Yeah. No.
It's so no compassion.
No.
Like I said, it wasn't a widow who must have
No.
created this.
No.
So we take people right away. I've had people that are 1 week, 2 weeks after their loss because I'd rather sit with them, even if they're crying. I sit with them. I tell them, just listen. And we don't charge anyone. and they could
Mm-hmm.
repeat,
Mm-hmm.
repeat, and then when you could understand everything, when you could get it, I just can't see leaving anyone with nothing.
Right.
And I just talk about that, and I speak about how it's like I have evidence, you know,
Mm-hmm.
of people who came in early and have done better because I took them right away and I
Yeah.
didn't make them wait. And I have evidence that staying continued was okay. These were things that they were telling me: don't stay connected. Once you do the 8 weeks, you let them go free because you don't want to stay connected. They'll get dependent on you. And
No,
that's
I
not
don't
so.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So these were like limited ideas, like, in the box. And I just decided to do what I thought I needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a few Facebook groups where, they're private groups with all the members, so we could all connect.
I love
I
it.
have one for younger members, one for members that are a little bit in their 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have like a networking group where if somebody has a business, like I did, a painting business where they could promote it. Like I give work,
Yeah.
like I have a girl who bakes cookies. I hired her to do my daughter's shower.
Yeah.
So I'm giving work to a widow because they have one
Yes.
income. I
Yes.
want to help a widow first before I help somebody on
Me
the outside
too.
who has two incomes.
Uh-huh.
So, and if they're looking to sell something, so everything's in this networking group. Or if
Mm-hmm.
they need like a handyman or a lawyer, medical negligence lawyer, they can connect with other widows on this topic. And we keep going back and forth in this networking group. So I just gave them what I needed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so great. So what else do you talk about in the book?
Um, my husband's lost to his wife
Mm.
Sally, which what
Mm.
he kind of went through with his kids. He had a lot of nannies in the years that I knew him, from when she got sick to when she died.
Mm.
She also had cancer, and I talk about Sally too. And
Mm.
when we started like our friendship, I had a dream about Sally, and I never saw her, but she
Mm-hmm.
came to me in a dream, and it was so profound. It was
Mm.
like she was like floating, and she was telling me without words, you know, that she was just giving me love and acceptance. Like she was telling me that, like she wanted me, and I
Mm.
was just like, it was. I couldn't tell anyone because it was embarrassing,
Mm.
and I know that God knows all things,
Yeah.
and He knew that Sally wasn't going to live to raise her kids, you know, and He gave me that job.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like Sally and I were doing it together,
Yeah.
you know, like we had some kind of a connection,
Mm-hmm.
that I was doing this with her. And we
Mm-hmm.
call Sally in my house with my kids, we call her mommy
Oh.
because they were so little when they lost her,
Yeah.
they lost their mommy,
Right.
and I'm mom,
Okay.
So yeah, so the book is about a little bit about my life. Everybody tells me when they read the book, they cry, they laugh, they cry, they laugh
Yeah.
because some things are funny that we went through,
Yeah. And where can
you know.
people find it? I'll also put a link,
Oh,
but
on
if they
Amazon.
Amazon.
It's on Amazon. Yeah.
And what's the title again?
Because I lived it.
Because I lived it. That's a great title. It's true. You
Thank
lived
you.
it. Like we can talk to widows so much more than like a social worker because we have lived it. Like I want to talk to someone, when I was a brand new widow, I was fortunate to know a few widows. Just God had put people I knew 7 of them. I called every one of them. Does this get better? Like I just wanted to talk to someone who'd been through it. And so I think that's what people appreciate about what you're doing is like you've been there. You're not just telling them, all this stuff.
Right. Well, the last group I did, they said to me, they were in a different group before my group, and they asked the woman, "Did you ever lose anyone?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I lost my cat."
Oh my gosh.
And they were like, they're like, they couldn't connect with her.
Right.
There was just no connection there. I feel like even though I'm married to Scott all these years, I still feel more comfortable when I'm with widowed people
Mm-hmm.
because they understand, like, you know,
Yes.
that part of my life where if I talk about Larry with people outside of the
Yeah.
widow world, they think I'm talking about him too much,
Yeah, they don't
or
get it.
I'm disrespecting my husband in some
Uh-huh.
way, and they just don't get it.
Yeah.
Where when the widows see I post things, they
Yeah,
get it.
exactly.
That I still think about him all the time.
Yes.
It's no disrespect to Scott. Like, I still love my husband and I love him.
Right. I feel like if you're not widowed or haven't been educated about that, people don't get it. They're like, you must like, I remember, so I started dating Joel 18 months after Luke died, and I was very vocal. I had a TikTok, and so I was talking about it, and people were so mean because I don't know the people on TikTok. They say whatever, and they're like, you must
Right.
not have loved your husband, and like all
So
kinds
mean.
of
So mean.
crazy stuff. I'm like, so I always tell people like, the length of time between, if you choose to date, which not everyone does, and that's okay, but if you choose to date, it's not
Right.
like there's a certain length of time that equals the love. Like the longer you wait, the more you loved him. That's not how it
Right.
works. I think
Right.
that's a common misconception too, that you have to wait a certain amount of time if you
I
really
think
love
that
them.
people have a lot of opinions about how something is without being in our shoes.
Exactly. Yes. And I mean,
I'm like, you have to walk in my shoes before you start giving me advice.
exactly.
You
Yes.
can't give me advice. You didn't walk in my shoes. You don't know how painful this is. You don't know how lonely it is. You don't know the depth of the pain of grief and how it never leaves us. Like, we always miss them. We always know, like our story didn't finish there.
Right.
It's like an unfinished story. In fact, that um, your program, the grief recovery program, I read the
Mm-hmm.
book, and
Mm.
and I wrote this in my book about that book. I recommended it
Yeah.
because there was a little part in there where you could write a goodbye to them.
Oh yeah, that's what we do the last week. That's a big part of the
I
program.
love
Yeah.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really got to say goodbye to Larry. So when I read
Right.
that book, I did it. I wrote
Good.
everything that I wanted to say to him that I never got to say. I mean, I
Yes.
cried through the whole thing, and then I just destroyed it. And I felt like it was so therapeutic.
Yes. Yep.
Like, I so needed to do that. Even
Yes.
after all these years, there's still things that, like, I had unfinished
Yep.
that I
Unfinished business.
wanted. Yeah, unfinished
Yes.
business. Yep.
And that's why it's so good. That's what I love about grief recovery, because we do that and every participant writes a letter, and it's powerful just to be able to, yes, there's always a lot of tears. But to be able to say in a safe space like, okay, this is, everything I wanted to say. And then a lot of people do burn their letters or do whatever they want with them, and they always talk about feeling lighter after doing it. And I know I felt like
Yeah, you
that
do.
too.
You
Hmm.
need to get that out. You need to cry that out.
Yes.
Sometimes we hold a lot of things in that we don't even realize. So I'm a big advocate for journaling.
Oh yeah.
And I write that in the book because I actually give everyone a book in every group,
Oh,
a,
that's
a plain
awesome.
notebook. So I said, there's no excuses not to write.
Right. And
And
so,
we do the letter writing too.
oh, that's great. So, in your eight
Yeah,
weeks, and then I know it's ongoing, I'm
right.
still curious about this. Do you have like a program that you do? Like you talk about this on the first
Yes,
week, oh, okay. Is that
yeah.
something that you created?
No, it was in the churches
Oh,
around
okay.
the diocese. I just updated it to be more
Yeah.
modern.
That's awesome.
And every night of the 8 weeks we have a topic. One night we just do open talk,
Yeah.
just in case someone has like issues with their in-laws or they can't do their thank you cards, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We talk about that openly.
Love it.
And then the last night we have like a candle ceremony,
Mm.
which is really sweet.
And what does that
So
mean exactly?
it's a structured program. So we light each candle in memory. Each one has a topic for what it's lit
Oh, okay.
for our spouses. And we used to use real candles, but then as the years went on, they wouldn't let me use the
Yeah.
matches in the church, so I had to do these like electric candles.
Right.
But it still has meaning. It's just like the completion of the group, and a lot of people get very anxious when we end the group because it's another loss.
Yes. We talk about that in grief recovery. Yeah.
That's why we stay connected.
Uh huh.
Because why should they have that feeling? So we're like, that's why we picked the captain and the co-captain so it could
I
continue.
love that. That's beautiful.
And then we have a chat and connect group, which once the groups end, if they don't stay together for whatever reason, we have a round table talk for anyone from any group could come in and just do round table talk.
Wow. So you've created these groups, you wrote a book. What's next for you? What are you going to continue to do as a widow
Oh, I don't
influencer?
know. Oh, I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet. I
Yeah.
do want to spread out. Maybe like not just be on Long Island.
Yeah.
Maybe spread out some. Maybe go to Florida and do some groups there. Maybe something like that.
That's
You
awesome.
know,
Yeah, I love
I'm
what you're
still
doing.
spreading out on the island, which
Right?
like I'm still going into. I'm going into all kinds of churches. They're so kind to us that they're giving us these free rooms because we don't want to charge the members.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah,
That's amazing that your
yeah.
groups aren't, you don't charge for them. That's
No,
wonderful that you
and the
can do
reason
that.
why I didn't do that because I didn't want them ever to think that there was any motive to me to help them other than
Mm-hmm.
sincerity. I felt like I didn't want them to think I'm trying to make a living off of this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just trying to help you get through it because
Mm-hmm.
I've been through it too,
Mm-hmm.
and I struggled in the beginning financially. Like I had to sell my house. I had to, I have all those things and, moving and all that. I have all that in the book, how I went through it,
Mm-hmm.
all the things I was fighting.
Yeah.
We fight a lot of things.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it's easy just to let go. I always say I never accepted that Larry died,
Mm.
but I surrendered.
Mm, that's good. That's
I
good.
just had to surrender. I had to stop fighting. I was
Yeah.
trying to live my old life.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't live my old life in
Right.
this new life.
Right. It's true.
You, yeah, you can't put new wine in old wineskins.
Right. So what advice would you give to like a brand new baby widow, as I call them, baby widows, like really new?
Um, I guess and I try not to give advice. I try to say, well, this is what worked for me.
Mm.
But if I had to give advice, I would say that grief is not something that just goes away on its own. It's something you have to work at. It takes a village to get through this. You
Yeah,
need your family, you need your friends, you need a good support group, you need a good therapist. Like you need a whole village
it's true.
to get through it. It's very hard to do this on your own. And a lot of people, that's part of the fight. They
Mm.
think they could do it on their own and they struggle. And sometimes they wait too long and then no grief group will take them because they're so far gone, like into their grief. And to sit with someone who's recent, it'll pull them back.
Mm.
So I tell them to get into a grief group right away, do these things right away, go through it.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the things you do to try to avoid it, you can't. It's always going
Mm-hmm.
to catch up with you. Like my hardest time in my grief was my first year.
Mm.
And a lot of people say, oh, the second year was harder. Well, the first year, if you were avoiding your grief, the second year will be harder
Mm-hmm.
because you avoided it all year. You didn't want to do
Yeah,
any work. You
true.
just wanted to shop and work and keep busy and not talk about it, not think about it. You just wanted to keep busy, keep busy, keep busy.
Yeah, that makes a
You
lot
could
of
only do that for
sense.
so long, right?
So, my old podcast host, Mark, we used to always talk about how for us, year one was way harder. We're like, why do people always say year two? And I see it constantly, people saying it. So, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Maybe they avoided feeling it. And I felt it from the beginning.
Me
Um,
too.
and I had anticipatory grief because he had cancer. I knew he was dying. And so
Hmm.
maybe that's why it was easier. But I like your explanation of like why, because I'm like, I never get when people tell me year two is harder. I'm like,
Right.
how?
I never get that. And I also think that that's not hopeful to someone who's going
No,
through it.
someone told
Like,
me
why would
that.
you? Yeah, if somebody told me that my first year, I would panic.
I know.
Like, something's going to be harder than this,
Yeah, someone told
you
me
know?
that. I was a few months in and they're like, oh, second year's harder. And I was so
It's a terrible
discouraged.
thing. It's a terrible thing to say to a widow.
Right.
It's like telling somebody about labor, like, how painful it was. Like, you don't do certain things. And as a
No.
widow, you should know that. Like, you shouldn't say that to a widow. You're scaring them because everybody's different.
Yeah.
And everyone's grief is different. And we all handle it differently. And I feel like I didn't have those coping skills, but I still dealt with it, and the first year was the hardest for me.
Yeah, me too.
So I feel that if you do the work, the second year won't be so hard because
Mm-hmm.
you would have done the work. You'll be stronger. You'll have like coping mechanisms, like to
Mm-hmm.
deal with. You'll have your journal, and the journal is really helpful because you could look back
Oh,
and
yeah.
see how you've grown because there's such little increments. How you
Yes.
grow. It's not a big. The healing doesn't come on big. It comes on slow.
That's true. Yeah, I can look back at those journals from the beginning of my widowhood, and man,
You're
I
like,
was
wow.
a totally different place, or even so I recorded a podcast 10 days after Luke died. So I had a different
Wow.
podcast before this. It was called the Peace
Mhm.
Cast. And it started out as I would interview people about things they'd been through and how God helped them through. But by the end, I was doing updates about Luke because everybody would ask and I'd just record a podcast and they could all listen. So then I came on 10 days and I am crying the entire time. But
Oh my
maybe
goodness.
like a year ago, I put it on this podcast. I said, I want you to hear where I was, because people are like, oh, you're just doing great. Like, you never, they don't know how bad it was for
Right.
me. So I put it on. I might do that again sometime. And people were able to see, whoa, you are in a different place. You were where we are. And so that's crazy. I actually
Right.
have my voice recorded talking about how, like, I go through how he died, and I'm literally crying the whole time. I actually, when I posted it, I had Joel, my current husband, listen to it, and he said it was very hard to hear me, like, it, he's heard about me talk about it, but to actually hear my voice from then.
To see and hear how much pain you were in
Yeah, and
and how
just,
hard it was. Yeah.
and it was hard to listen to, but it's also like, just like the journaling, just to see where you've come, and
You
like,
see
whoa.
how far you can grow, and you'll always think about them, but you're not where you were. And when people say to me, I'm coming up to that 1 year mark and I'm really anxious about it, I'm like, it's not going to be like it was when it happened. Think
Right.
about how you were the day it happened. Like, literally think about it.
Yeah.
A year later, you are not going to act that way on the one year. You're not. You have
Mm-hmm.
grown. All year you were growing, but it was so slow you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
You couldn't see the growth.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I like journaling, because that's where you see it. You look
Yes.
back and you say, wow, I was a mess when I first started this book.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I've really loved getting to know your story and what you're doing. And I think your story is so hopeful for widows. I know so many widows who are like, someday I want to give back, and your story is showing them that
Thank
it's
you.
possible to not only like be healed, but then help other people. That's how I feel like if I had to go through this, I didn't choose this, but God helped me through it. I want to have other, like, show other people how to do it. And that you're doing the same thing.
Right.
We're on the same
It's great.
widow
We're on,
mission.
yep. We're on the same widow
I
mission too. So
love,
that there's so many widows out
I
there.
know it's
It's
almost
amazing. So
overwhelming.
young.
I know.
Yes.
Like,
I never knew that until I
neither did
did this
I.
work.
Uh-uh.
That was one of the most surprising things, how many young people we get. And it's
Yes.
really sad. And unless you're in it, you don't know it.
Right. It's like this whole other world that people don't know about. And I get overwhelmed sometimes, in our big group that's almost to 10,000 people, which just exploded recently in the last couple months. Like, every day there's new people and new stories.
I
And
mean, right.
it's like, oh, there's so much, but we can,
There's so many. Yep.
it's almost like, when it's like you're overwhelmed with, like, isn't there's like a story about all the starfish on the sea and I can't save them all, but you just start,
Right.
with what you
So
can,
one.
one by one,
Yeah.
like, you're helping that one. And that's what we're doing. Like, we can't help
Right.
everybody, but we're doing as
If you
much
could
as we
just
can.
help one, you've done something. At least you helped that one, right?
Yes. And this is something kind of that I love, is if we can not only help that starfish, that new widow, but we teach them, this is what you're doing too, how to help other starfish, other widows, then it's going to help
It's
even
the ripple
more.
effect. Yes,
Yes.
it's a
And so
ripple effect. It just keeps
that's
going.
my favorite part. In fact, they don't know this, but by the time this comes out, they'll already have it. So I'm having a Widow Goals retreat with my leaders. And so those are the six, we're in 6 places. So myself plus the 5 people across the country who've said, I want to lead groups. And they've been doing it about 3 months. And I bought them a sweatshirt that I designed that says, Empowered Widows Empower Widows. And I
Oh,
was like,
awesome.
it started out like I saw that when it was like empower women. I'm like, no, I'm changing it to widows. I love that. And so I got them these sweatshirts. I'm going to give it to them there. But that's what I want to do. I don't want to just
Right.
help widows. I want to
Right.
help them to help people. And
That's why I started teaching. I started
yes.
teaching the facilitate. I started during COVID because I said we need a lot of facilitators. I'm not going to have enough when this is over. I
Mm-hmm.
saw it coming. And then I really got into training. I made it like a 3-hour class where I would just train
Nice.
them and let them know what to expect and how we run a group
I love
and how,
it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you're
And,
doing that.
so they observe for a year. They
Mm.
observe our groups for a year. And then we make them an assistant to a facilitator that's a leader, and then they're their assistant, And then when they get stronger, then I split them apart. And then I start
I
another
love
group
that.
with
So
someone else
you're
that's new.
completely doing that right now of
Yeah,
empowering them to go out
yeah.
and help.
It's a good thing to do, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Because
absolutely.
there's too many for any one
Yeah.
person to handle them all. Like we need people all over the United States.
Yes.
There's a lot of people. I mean, even during COVID, I was helping a girl in Africa, someone in Ireland, Australia. They were all over the globe
Oh, yeah.
because with Zoom, I was able to help anyone. And
Yes.
I wasn't working. I wasn't doing anything. I couldn't even do the groups. We were doing them all through Zoom. So
Right.
I wasn't going out. So I had the morning time to just do one-on-one with people.
Yes.
Just because they were in a different country, the time zone was different.
Right. Yes.
So we would make it work.
Yes, that's absolutely amazing. I mean, and you pointed out in the beginning of the podcast that when you were widowed, it was completely different. Technology has changed everything. Like
Yeah.
we can find our support groups online, we can do podcasts, we can, all this stuff that wasn't available to you. It seems like probably the most that was available to you was like books. Is that right?
Yeah. And I couldn't read. I couldn't read.
Really?
I
Like
just
just like you
couldn't,
couldn't
I
listen to
couldn't,
music?
yeah, yeah, I just couldn't read. I couldn't focus on anything. I felt
Mm,
like my mind was like all over the place. Um, and since my second loss,
yeah.
I started listening to books.
Yeah, that's a
And I
great way
do a
to do
lot of
it.
audio books. That's why I'm working on an audio book
Mm-hmm.
for myself with the Brooklyn, Long Island accent,
Yeah.
which I do want to hear how you did it yourself,
Yeah.
um, because I feel a lot of widows can't read. They tell me that they have a hard time reading. But my book is an easy reader. I heard it takes 2 hours to read it. I
Mm,
didn't make a big book. I
right.
wanted it to be little. I mean, there was a lot of stuff I could have said,
Right.
but I kept it short and sweet because I know it's hard to read a whole book when you're widowed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely can be. Well, thank you so much. So, if it's okay with you, I'd love to close by praying for you. Would that be good?
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Yes.
God, I just thank you so much for Kathryn being here today. Thank you that she reached out to me, and thank you for the work that she does with widows. It's absolutely amazing. Thank you for healing her heart so she can help other people. I just pray blessings over her ministry as she continues to do these groups. I pray blessings over her book, that it gets in the hand of so many widows and it helps so many of them. And I just pray for this podcast that will go to all the people who need to hear it and be inspired by Kathryn's story. I pray for Kathryn's family, for her kids, for her husband, and for everything she's doing, that you continue to bless her. And we just pray for the listeners that today you will cover them with a peace that passes all understanding. I pray for joy for them today, that just as they're going about their day after they listen to this, that they will find some joy, whether it's the first time since their husband died or it's been longer, that you just bring joy to them. And thank you so much for technology, that we can be here and we can support each other all over the world. And I just thank you so much for all you've done. Amen.
Amen.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
You're
And God bless you
welcome.
for all that you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, if you liked this podcast, get a little bing 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. If you have a minute, leave a little review. It really helps this to get out to all the people. And if you have a story, I have an application you can fill out in the show notes, and you too can have your story featured, because if you're here, you have a story, and your story can help someone that I can't. And so we'd love to hear from you. Also, if you'd like to join, we have 2 groups. If you just search for Widow Too Soon Community, you'll find the big one on Facebook. If you want to be in a smaller community that's just actual podcast listeners, actually, Kathryn, I don't know if you know about this, but we have a group that is only 70 people, 70 something. And the only way you can get in it is by asking me to join. And so I will give you an invite to that, because it's actual
Thank
listeners.
you.
And so the other one, they don't know it's a podcast most of the time at first. And so we used to have, like, our community was a couple hundred, everybody knew each other. And so they still wanted that community. So we switched over to that. So I have a link in the show notes to find me on Facebook if you would like to be part of that. And I think that's all the announcements I have for today. So everybody have a great day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Widowed Too Soon with Michelle Bader Ebersole. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, rate and review. And we'd also love for you to join our Widowed Too Soon community on Facebook. See you next time.